Hello and welcome to the 42 Rugby Weekly. Gavan Casey here, back in studio, I was going to say, in Cork. And I'm delighted to be joined by the two stalwarts, Murray Kinsella of the 42. Murray, how are things?
Good, Gav. Good to have you back. How was your break?
Really interesting. No, it was thoroughly enjoyable. I have to say, on the Thursday, I guess it was the morning or afternoon, one of my friends came up to me with a kind of a concerned voice, and he was like, Gav, I got a message from my dad there. And I was like, oh yeah? Jesus, is everything all right? And he was like, yeah, he just said, I'm listening to the 42 podcast, and Murray said Gav's on the piss in Kerry. He's with you, laughing emoji. And I was trying to think, who is he implying is the bad influence here? But I have to stress to Mr. Quirk that young Edmund did not lead me astray, nor did I lead him, I don't think. No, it was terrific. And I did tune into the podcast in the end through gritted teeth. But no, you were kind enough to me, and it was very enjoyable.
We missed you, Gav.
How have things been on your end?
Yeah, all good. Tipping away. It's picking up again, isn't it? Like, so much class rugby ahead, so much excitement building again. There was a bit of a lull with the Rainbow Cup, obviously, but some brilliant stuff ahead.
Bernard Jackman joins us also. Birch, how's your week been going?
Yeah, it's good. I'm looking forward to this chat. You sent through a great itinerary last night, so yeah, it's mad in June. There's still such good content to talk about and new stories. So yeah, let's look forward to this podcast.
Fair play, Gav. You did put a bit of shape on things. You're like our director of rugby, kind of.
He had a hard look at himself on holidays. Looked in the mirror, said, "I got to come back. I got to come back more professional, more organised." Great start.
Yeah. Let's see how long it lasts. We'll look ahead to the Lions towards the end of the show. We're going to chat about the top 14 and Premiership finals. I'm actually kind of reading notes here because there is a lot to get through. We're going to chat about the sevens at the top, Seán O'Brien's retirement at Connacht, the introduction of the 50-22 rule at test level. And I think we're going to build the show today around Irish coaches abroad and I guess some of the culture shock and the cultural differences that you might have experienced, Bernard. And we'll chat obviously about that in relation to Noel McNamara heading to the Sharks and what a loss that is to Leinster. And I think that's it. We'll just tear into it, will we? And I know, Murray, yourself and Owen were chatting about the sevens on Monday, so I'll give the first word to Birch here. How good was that?
Yeah, they were excellent, and they're a very good sevens team now. And a friend of mine was over there coaching with Hong Kong, and he's ex-Kenya, so he's been on the circuit for 6 or 7 years. And obviously a lot of people are talking up France, but he said to me on the Saturday, he said Ireland just look nearly complete. And I spoke to him afterwards, and he thinks they've a medal chance. They're very well organised. They work incredibly hard. They maybe don't have the flair that some teams have, but the nuts and bolts, they kind of play a very structured sevens games. And then they have, some unbelievable pace. So, yeah, credit to them. They've come a long way. And we saw glimpses of them when they played in London. They were very good. But I just think they came to this tournament and managed to perform. Look, there was a lot of easy games, but the French game was nearly a nearly complete performance. So they go to Olympics on merit, and it's a great achievement for those lads who spend so much time out of the limelight. It's a very difficult sport. It's a very hard sport on in terms of training. They talk about 400-meter runners, having to go to dark places regularly. I think sevens athletes are very similar, and it's great for them to get the reward for what's been an incredibly long journey and lots of disappointments as well on the way and setbacks. But most of those lads have, nearly all of them have been through that, and now they get hopefully the reward with an Olympics and going there with not just cannon fodder. I mean, no one will want to play them. They're actually a very, very good sevens team.
What struck me, Murray, was I guess the jubilance afterwards, but also going back to something we were talking about a few weeks ago, like the naked authenticity of these people in their interviews and how refreshing it was to hear just like the raw emotion of it, but also Billy Dardis pointing back towards not only the people who got him there, but the fact that it's been a journey for a lot of those guys. Many of whom have been kind of cast aside by clubs over the years or released, and at the end of the day, when the dust has settled, when they're down the pub in 20 years' time or whenever, they'll be able to point back to 2021 and be like, I played in the Olympics that year, you know, and that's just a crazy culmination of a crazy journey for a lot of these people. But you got an email from our famed member Keylon, and while we can't get to all of the things in the email this time around because it's a pretty busy show, I thought he made a really interesting point about that Sevens team, as he put it, like potentially fixing rugby's image problem in this country, which is strongly worded, but again, something we've referred to in the past, where there are a lot of people from outside of the rugby bubble who detest the sport. And what I noticed with the Sevens team qualifying for Tokyo was a lot of Olympic aficionado friends of mine who either work in the media or are peripheral to the media. They were overjoyed by watching this team qualify. And they are the people who we're talking about, who would describe Ireland beating the All Blacks as a friendly, or say they're the third best team in an 8-team global game, you know, or sorry, third best team in Europe in an 8-team global game. And I think it might just help, actually, as Keylon was asking, to draw eyes towards a version of the sport, but also towards people who seem like really likable characters who are going to be on this most prominent stage over the summer.
Absolutely. I've had exactly the same experience with people who aren't even that into 15s rugby, kind of flagging that this has happened, sending me on the highlights and saying this team is pretty cool. They play some great stuff. And you're right, they're so likable as a bunch. People who've had like real setbacks in their rugby careers in terms of not getting provincial senior contracts, not even getting into academies, some of them, and taking a different avenue and making sacrifices for, like, these guys are on a maximum 18 grand a season salary. So they're not like top professional players where they're earning mega bucks to play. A lot of them are working or studying alongside doing this, and they're genuine Olympic athletes in that sense. They've been just chasing that goal, and now they've got it. You've got people like Jordan Conroy as well, who I think Keylon mentioned in his email, who's just a refreshingly interesting guy. And he was late to rugby. He was in his late teens when he took it up in Tullamore. And what an incredibly exciting player to watch. And a guy who backs himself, who has a bit of confidence and knows he's shit hot at the moment and is enjoying that. And that's what is enjoyable to engage with as well. Like, hearing him talking about rinsing defenders is fun. It's enjoyable. And the, I suppose, bond that group has because of their shared experiences, both in terms of setbacks individually, but also, as Bernard mentioned, collectively. Like, they missed out on the 2016 Olympics. They missed out on the World Series agonizingly at the first time asking in the Hong Kong qualifier. And they're just like, it's a cliche in rugby about brothers and being like a family, but these lads literally live on each other's hips. They're together all the time. They really care about each other. I suppose you get that with a smaller squad as well. And it is going to be a really interesting story over the summer. Like, the qualifying has been such a big thing, but imagine they got on a bit of a run over there over the course of the 2 or 3 days. It'll be really picked up on by people who aren't even, as I said, into 15s rugby. So it's a real big opportunity for the sport as a whole, and I'm just so excited to see how they get on now.
Bert, when I was watching Conroy's interview afterwards, I immediately thought the O'Donovan brothers. You know, he has that kind of appeal to him, like that sort of salt of the earth type character, but also quick-witted. And I mean, even the interviewer, it seemed, was struggling to hold it together and ask the questions because he's just not your regular interviewee. And like, again, when you've got a whole country watching, this is a massive opportunity for these guys as well to become household names, if you like, in a sport that wouldn't necessarily be a household sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's effectively down to their commitment. And obviously there, if you've put good structures in place, but you know, as Murray said, it's not easy to stay on that voyage and stay on that journey with no guarantee, no guaranteed pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. I mean, it was, the whole qualification system for the Olympics. They had one setback, and then they were basically having to commit probably another year of their life, on low wages, giving up, alternative opportunities to stay in it, and and they managed to perform. And I think there's lots of good characters in Irish rugby. Unfortunately, with the provinces, we don't really get to see it as much. I think the Sevens, by their nature, they tend to be more I don't know, freestyle in terms of their career options. They're on they're committing to this journey. There's a lot of travel. They're good lads, and they're coming from like a lot of different backgrounds, and maybe some of the rejection they've had early in their career, because some of them have started as 15s players, very good 15s, underage players, and then those setbacks have maybe helped them kind of realise and be comfortable who they are. If that sounds a bit over the top, but they're just very comfortable in their own skin. They're not afraid to show their personality, and look, Irish people warm to charismatic people, and particularly when they're doing great things on a sporting field. So it's going to be brilliant. I'm looking forward to I am a fan of sevens, even though I'm not a fan of the idea that it's a guaranteed pathway. But I think in its own right, it's a phenomenal sport, and I'm really looking forward. I really enjoyed last weekend, and I'm looking forward to seeing these guys, go to the Olympics, and they genuinely have a chance of doing something, because they've got depth, they've got a huge amount of experience, and they have 3 or 4 players, I think, who are now recognised worldwide as being top end sevens players, which is incredible.
What a summer ahead. Sorry, Murray, were you going to come in there?
Yeah, we said last week that the sevens hadn't there'd been an investment from the RFU, but it hadn't really grasped the consciousness. But look what we just saw happen last week. It was the watershed moment, and everyone's awake to this now. And I mean, it was interesting. I spoke to Ian Fitzpatrick, one of the originals, during the week for a piece this weekend on the 42. But one of the things he said was fascinating to me. He said, from his point of view, the guys who come into the program and gone on to 15 success, they always talk about my passing's better, my tackling's better because of sevens. His perspective was that they actually got a bit of a chance to kind of back themselves, be a bit of an individual at times, gain more confidence from beating people one-on-one or defending one-on-one. And that it was actually that mental side of things that he saw improving those guys. And I mean, you look at the likes of Shane Daly and Hugo Keane and Jimmy O'Brien, they absolutely got that out of the program as well. So I think it's brilliant that those original guys are getting the reward now, but lots of people have benefited along the way.
In other news, and kind of more somber news, we heard obviously during the week that Seán O'Brien of Connacht is retiring at the age of 26 due to concussion. And it's difficult to know what to say, Murray, about something like this, apart from just wishing Seán well and sort of lamenting the reality of the situation. Captain Ireland at the 2014 Junior World Championship, made 60 appearances for Connacht, and describes himself in his statement as one of the lucky ones, which I guess is one way of looking at it. He got to play at the top level, but to see a guy's career cut short, it's just another reminder really of how precarious a career it can be, I guess.
Yeah, hate to see this kind of stuff, especially around concussion, especially someone who's 26. And for a guy who I never felt like he got that full run at fulfilling his potential due to the injuries, not just the concussion issue. He's had he's been plagued by it and had obviously massive potential as an Ireland under-20s captain. And he was a guy who was unbelievably respected in the Connacht group as a really hard-edged player, something that Connacht probably have missed at times with his absence. And they're kind of hoping to get him back to bring that edge. Like, being respected by teammates in that manner is a big thing. And it's just a pity we'll never get to see the full extent of it. Obviously, it's 100% the right decision if that's the medical advice, and you back a guy like that to be a success in whatever he chooses to next, in terms of hopefully staying around the game a little bit and contributing something there, but also outside of rugby. It's horrible seeing this kind of stuff, and we wish him all the best with recovering from that and getting on with his life. He's achieved an unbelievable amount in the game, even with that lack of luck around injuries. So congrats to him on his career.
Birch, as somebody, a former professional player who had first-hand experience with head injuries, what's your kind of instinctive reaction when you hear news like this, apart from the obvious disappointment? Like, does it almost give you a sense of fortuitousness, I guess, that you got to enjoy the full extent of your career in a sport where it could so possibly have turned out otherwise?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I've seen Seán O'Brien nearly stopped my coaching career before it started. So when I was coaching St. Michael's in 2011, we had a star-studded team. We had Dan Levy, Ross Maloney, Dennis Coulson, Nick McCarthy, Ross Byrne, Rory O'Loughlin, Cian Kelleher, and we went to play Ross Gray in the first round of the Cup. Didn't know anything about them in minute, and Ross Byrne kicked the penalty in the 7th minute of injury time to get a draw. And Seán O'Brien was pretty much the outstanding player on the field, and we beat him in a replay narrowly, like we were poxed. And we went on to win the Cup. So I've been following him since then, and he's just an outstanding player. He's not a flash player, or he wasn't a flash player, or wasn't going to get a lot of man of the matches, but he's the kind of fella you'd want to go to war with, and I think that's why he's so respected by everyone who's played with and against him. And absolutely, I was very fortunate to get a long career, but in some ways, I'm actually heartened to see guys being able to retire early if they are suffering, to be honest, and not trying to carry on and take risks. I think that's been the big improvement. I mean, the awareness. Like, I've no doubt there's fellas I played with who at 26 were suffering from, concussion, were susceptible to concussion. The right thing to do was to retire, but it wasn't on our radar whatsoever. So in some ways, obviously, I feel really sorry for Seán, but I think from his long-term health, this is obviously the right thing to do. And any fear with a concussion injury, and if the medical advice is to retire, then you don't ask any questions, you just do it. So in some ways, I'm heartened that the game has moved on and players have that medical advice looking after them really for the long term.
Well, Ross Byrne's ears would have perked during the week, Murray, if he had heard news, caught wind of the Sydney Morning Herald on whatever it was, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I think they were the first to report that the 50-22 law will be introduced at test level across the board in the near future. And listen, a lot of listeners to this podcast will have seen this law in action in Super Rugby in the Southern Hemisphere, and they know what it's all about. But equally, I'd say we have a lot of listeners who kind of tune in for the provincial stuff, the Irish stuff, and maybe wouldn't have their eye on that. So could you kind of give us a sense of the impact it could potentially have on the test game?
Yeah, so the law is essentially if you kick from within your own half and the ball bounces in the field of play and then rolls into touch inside the opposition 22, you'll get the throw into the line out, which is obviously a drastic and unbelievably advantageous change to the game if you've got that tactical kicking quality. The reason this is happening is because the powers that be hope it'll mean that teams will have to stack their backfield a little bit more strongly and consistently. Obviously, at the moment, everyone's got a 13 plus 2, even a 14 plus 1 defense at times for the really aggressive defensives. But if you've obviously got that potential for bouncing the ball and touch and getting an attacking line out, you're going to look to exploit it, and therefore you've got to have that coverage close to the touchlines, potentially even getting a little bit more coverage with 2 players back there. And the hope is that that'll slow down the line speed in the front line. There'll be a bit more space for attacking rugby. So that's how it works in practice, in thought rather, in theory. In practice in Super Rugby, we didn't really see it being effective, but I think Australian Super Rugby was the worst place in the world to try it because they haven't got a kicking expertise there. They're really catching up in that domain of the game. They've never had a willingness or desire to kick, and only recently I think we're seeing them open their eyes. And even in the last couple of years, you didn't see teams trying to exploit this trial law as it was there. As I mentioned before, Rob Kearney was probably one of the only ones when he went down to Western Force who was really clearly in his mind thinking this is an opportunity for a 50-22. So I think once the Northern Hemisphere guys, as you mentioned, Ross Byrne, Johnny Sexton, basically any out half up in this neck of the woods who's used to a more tactical kicking game, get their hands on this, there's a lot more scope, and there's going to be a lot more consistent use of it and thoughtful and tactical use of it. So I'm actually excited to see what people in this side of the world can do with it. The Kiwis as well. Obviously, they're very good at their tactical kicking, and it could be a big change to the game. People are worried probably about more rolling mauls if teams can use the 50-22 to their advantage. But if it reduces the line speed a little bit and creates a bit more frontline space for attacks, well, that's a positive outcome. So worth continuing with the trial, I think, at a higher level and definitely outside Australia.
A rolling maul is nothing to worry about anyway, Birch, is it?
One of the rare beauties in life. more rolling mauls, please. No, I agree with Murray. It's going to be fascinating. I actually don't think it'll be the 10s that'll exploit it as much. It'll be the 9s. Because I think, most teams back two players are very good at reading. So it'll either be the 9 from a midfield ruck inside his own half. And we saw, I don't know if anyone saw England-France in the under-20s. There's the Leicester 9, Jack Van Pooreveld, did 2 brilliant kicks that would have been 50-22s from midfield rucks. I just think that by the time the ball goes to the 10 or the 15, that the backfield will be reading that, so it'll be harder to get that runner out. But from the 9, it's very difficult to defend, to be honest. But yeah, and obviously then you're going to have the 10s who can kick it back across the ruck. So against the grain as such, which will be easier fine grass because it's harder to read as a backfield player. Yeah, so I think it's and the momentum swing of being stuck in your own half and next thing having a line out 10 yards out is absolutely massive. So yeah, I think it's a really good feature. I agree with Murray. Australia wasn't a place to try it, but look at we'll get a run at it, and I don't think it'll take over the game, but I think every so often we'll see a game swing on a successful kick like that.
Yeah, I was speaking to Dave Alred, who actually works now in Australian rugby, the famous kicking coach who worked with Wilkinson and Sexton and all the kind of top guys. And he just kind of underlined that this means everyone in your backline really has to be a good kicking threat. And that's the way the game kind of has gone. Birch, you did a brilliant piece, was it last year around England or the year before?
Yeah.
And the variety of kicking threats in their game. Right footers, left footers. It's really hard to defend when you don't know where the main kicking threat is coming from, when the whole backline, including the wings, kicking on the edge can kick. So it just underlines the importance of that skill set. Even a couple of forwards kicking always catches people off guard. And we've seen more of that in the game recently. So, we're in the era of good kicking, and not just dull kicking, but good attacking kicking that has a positive intent.
Who was the first name that sprung to mind, Murray, when you hear that this rule is going to be introduced at test level? The player who you immediately think he's going to exploit that to within an inch of its life?
Well, he's not playing anymore, but Rod should dust down the boots. I mean, how many 50-22s? I think I have a few clips of him kicking 50-22s before they were a thing. He was the master at it. So I think he might have a comeback on the cards.
Same question, Birch. Was there anyone from the current game?
I was laughing myself. It was Rog. I think Sexton, Jack Carty, in terms of the 2 Irish guys who will revel in this and just see it as a new challenge to be able to find that space.
Speaking of new challenges,
I have a folder. Sorry, Gav. I do have a folder of them, and there's a couple examples from Hogg recently, George Ford, and a couple of scrum halves. You're right, Birch. There's one from Hodge as well. So variety across the backline, but someone like Hogg with his spiral kicking as well, he'll be good at it.
Keith Wood would have had a field day with it, to be honest.
He's kicked a 50-22 as well. I think it's on my Instagram. Yeah, there's an example in there.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're a huge advocate for those clips. I'm sure people can dig them out. Come here. Speaking of new challenges then, Noel McNamara. I thought it was striking how many Leinster fans recognised how big a loss this is to them, and his departure was greeted with real sadness from what I saw, just in comment sections and online and things like that. And this is a really exciting opportunity for him at the same time, Murray, isn't it? I mean, we kind of just love to hear Irish coaches going to play their trade abroad and challenge themselves in a completely different environment to that to which they're accustomed. So it doesn't really get much bigger than joining a former Super Rugby franchise who we're going to be seeing a lot more of in this neck of the woods.
It'll be really exciting to see how he tries to pick apart the Irish provinces and how his perspective on that is from the outside. And I'm sure the conversations he'll have with guys back here after those games will be fascinating for them as well. A really exciting opportunity and something really different, and it'll be brilliant as a ambitious young coach as he is to add another string to his bow. He had that stint in New Zealand for a couple of months. He has done the 20s, obviously all those developmental roles, running a schools program as well, and a guy who definitely serves as a bit of inspiration to a lot of coaches out there, given he didn't have the big kind of playing background, professional playing background, but is a really impressive character. Anytime I've interviewed him, I've been really impressed with his, I suppose, strength around the actual coaching and teaching and working with people as much as the tactical and technical stuff. He loves a John Wooden quote, and he loves, I suppose, studying those kind of great coaches. And I suppose he's kind of it's a shame that his course is kind of run here in Ireland for now. There wasn't an opening for him in Leinster. There was a bit of chat around Felipe Contepomi going at one stage, but he's staying on, so that opening wasn't there. And then the other provinces had filled their kind of slots that opened up. Dan Soper's going to attack coach in Ulster. Connacht obviously got their staff in place as well. And I mean, it does look like he's at that stage of his career where he needs more senior responsibility. So he's got it abroad, and by all accounts, it sounds like the RFU have kind of been part of it, and hopefully he'll be obviously kept in contact with on a regular basis, that if something does open up back here and he's doing well with Sharks, he can reintegrate into the system. But he's going to learn a huge amount over there.
Bert, you caught wind of this story pretty early on. What was your kind of immediate reaction to hearing it?
Yeah, look, I love seeing coaches back themselves and take the opportunity. There's a very small number of performance coach job opportunities in Ireland. So performance is obviously working with the senior provincial teams or the national team. And there's a lot of very good coaches working in the, what I would call as development coaches. So working in the pathways, working in the academies. And I think it's, certainly from my dealings, I'd say nearly all of them have ambitions to try it as a performance coach and have a shot at it. And it's so hard to get that opportunity in Ireland, particularly actually. I think it's nearly sometimes harder from within, because if you're doing a good job in the academy, from a strategic point of view, it's a bit of a risk to promote you to the performance team and risk the pathway starting to slow down a little bit. So it's sometimes you need to go away, prove yourself as a performance coach, and have that experience at the top level, and be able to come back with that point of difference. And I just wrote down a few names. Like, we're very lucky in terms of Irish coaches abroad. Obviously Felix Jones, the Box, Mark McCall, Saracens, Declan Kidney, London Irish, Jerry Flanny, Harlequins, Kieran Campbell got to Ealing, Nigel Carlin, Glasgow, Jimmy Duffy will end up abroad, I'm sure. Jonathan Bell, Worcester, Rog and Donica Ryan in La Rochelle, Prendy in Racing, Jeremy Davison, James Coughlin in Brive, Noel Mack in Sharks, and Alan Clark in Seawolves. I'm probably missing a few, but like that's nearly as many coaches are coaching professionally here, in the four provinces in terms of numbers. And I think it's great. I think they're going to be adding value, getting experience, which they may bring back, or if not, they're just living their dream of being a pro coach and getting to live in different parts of the world and experience different things. And I think the nicety of this one is that the Sharks are going to be back here playing in the URC, which is, we're not going to lose touch with him, and it's going to be very measurable in terms of what he's doing. For example, if you're coaching defence in Super Rugby, it's not always ideal as your next step back into being a defence coach in the Northern Hemisphere. So, but I think the fact they're playing this competition will be great for him. And I think I tried to hire him to become a backs coach in Clontarf in about 2010, and I met him in Kylie's, and he came in with like folders worth of, I think he'd every session he'd ever done. He's very, very organised, and that's probably what everyone says about him, is his organisation ability, his management. And now with this role, it's different than being an academy manager. It's different being head coach of an under-20s. It's given him the chance to just focus on, the minutiae of attack and backs. And, you have to go from having a real kind of global look to just looking after one area and be measured on that. So it's going to be a fascinating challenge for him. But yeah, like, Durban's a great place to live. And it's a brilliant opportunity for him professionally, but I think also from a family point of view to live in Durban for whatever, a couple of years or for longer, and become a global coach, which is hard. I think it's class, and I love seeing him do it. To be honest, like, I've had a lot of players and coaches who've come to me saying, "Oh, can you help me get this, that, and the other?" And I'm desperate. I'm hungry. I want this more than anything. And then when the opportunity comes up, they don't back themselves or jump, and that's very frustrating. And I know one player I helped, and he went away recently, and he only lasted 3 days. He came back, so like, that's very frustrating when they're telling you that this is the be-all and end-all and they do anything to get there. The reality is a lot of people won't, you know, and all those names that I've mentioned. And it's easier for some when you're going to, like, you know, a big club and there's going to be a really good infrastructure. But some of those guys I mentioned, you know, they went as in minor roles and they've had to dig in and make it happen. And it wouldn't be easy, you know. There won't be, you know, a limousine waiting at the airport for you when you go to a lot of these clubs as an assistant. You're pretty much fend for yourself. So it's not easy, but yeah, it's great to see people take that opportunity and want to get better and prove themselves.
Was there any limousine waiting for you outside Kylie's? I'd say any new fans we've gained through sevens, we've just lost in that moment.
Sorry, yeah.
Nah, I'm joking.
Stereotypical. We were all good. We didn't get eggs thrown at us when we came out. No one knew who we were, so it was fine.
Birch, just on the actual transition, I guess, from being a coach in this country to moving abroad, something you know very well. I know you were in France and Wales. He's going to South Africa, but you no doubt know plenty of coaches, South African coaches based in South Africa. How much of a change can you expect culturally, not in terms of the two countries, but in terms of rugby environment, in terms of approach to match preparation, coaching, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it can be difficult. It's obviously not as difficult as France because of the language. But having said that, you know, there's a strong chance that people in his building will speak Afrikaans in front of him, and you know, so it's not completely easy either from a language point of view. Some of their first language will be Afrikaans, even though the Sharks will be more European than the teams on the high veld. There will be players there who speak Afrikaans, you know, having coffees, etc. And English won't be their first language. And sometimes in the office, you know, people will speak Afrikaans. And I certainly for me, like I went to France without any French, so you know, I was going in the morning at 6 o'clock in the morning and coming home at 6 in the afternoon. And the only time anyone would say anything to you in English is if it directly related to what you needed to do. And so you're sitting there, you're trying to keep busy on your laptop, you're looking at footage, but you're completely lost around what the next day's content is, you know, to a certain extent, bar your little block. And that can be really hard. But you just need to understand why you're doing it and work hard on the language. For Noel, there's going to be there's quite a few coaches pissed off in South Africa that he's got this gig. So that's something to look at. He can't get worried about that, but there will be scrutiny on him because a lot of coaches feel that the pathway is blocked as it is because of quota restrictions. So for a non-South African to come in, you know, there's going to be eyes on that, and absolutely, I think the Sharks are 100% right to find the best coach for the job. But I do know from my contacts there, there's, you know, and there's always politics and there's always bitchiness. But certainly, I've been shook by. Well, I suppose it doesn't happen very often. It's very rare. I know Eddie Jones went to the Stormers. There has been a few consultants gone in and out, but in general, South African teams are coached by South Africans, so there is probably a little bit of scrutiny on them there. The Sharks aren't anywhere near as well organised as the Irish under-20s would have been, or Leinster would be. So that'll be a challenge for him as an assistant coach, wanting everything to be really structured, really organised, but it's not your job to do it, and understanding what you're going to be measured by, which is obviously your tax success, your backline success, and that can be frustrating if you can see things that can be done better. And obviously, you know, you'd like to be in an environment where everyone's opinion is used and it's about making the team better. But sometimes some coaches, head coaches, or heads of performance, you know, they get challenged by that as well. So it's a really much, and you're dealing with people you don't know anything about, you know, bar maybe the interview process. So whereas obviously in Leinster, you know, he will know all the people, in the IRFU, he will know all the people he's working with, and he'll know their personality types, and he'll know how much he can push, etc., etc. So that's all brilliant. I mean, that's brilliant for your development as a person. It's brilliant for your mind, you know, facing new challenges. But yeah, it's unbelievably exciting. But it certainly won't be easy, you know. It's certainly not easy going into a group of players who don't know anything about you, and, you know, proving to them that you're going to make them better.
That's fascinating, and the fact that the cultures can be so different. And you're mentioning trying to catch up on French and fit in, but obviously you went from that assistant role to being the head coach. Like, what were the keys to finding the balance between adapting to what's there and staying true to what you kind of believe in?
Yeah, I made a big mistake. I should have kept coaching. I think I should have taken responsibility for an area of our performance, and to use a business term, I was kind of a helicopter view. So I got caught in a lot of stuff that was nothing to do with rugby, and that was the big thing for me, is that, you know, your day becomes about HR, it becomes about media, it becomes about sponsors, it becomes about obviously dealing with players' issues, and that is core part of it. So that's not a drag in your time. But I certainly feel that for me to be, I would have been better served. Now, some of it was down to budget, not having resource to have somebody do a lot of other stuff, but to stay attached to the field and have one area where you're responsible for and have that contact with the players day to day, rather than just being the one leading the review on a Monday, or leading the preview, but not being responsible for the implementation of that, if you get me. So yeah, but again, I did it the other way as well. So I found it maybe just as hard to go from kind of being a forwards coach in Clontarf, being a bit of everything in Michael's, being a head coach all the way through with Coolmine, Newbridge, and Coolmine, Newbridge and Tullow, and then going into just doing after the defence and the breakdown my first year, and having never coached those before. So yeah, but I think all that stuff is just something you just need to understand. You know, you're going to struggle at times and you're going to doubt yourself, but try and keep referring back to what your key principles are and the most important thing right now. But yeah, head coaching is completely different than being a unit coach, particularly now with squads and academies and staff. Like even in the Dragons, with a very small budget, we had, I think, 68 people that reported into you. And yeah, that's totally different in coaching. It's nothing to do with coaching at all. But I think that'll be good. I think being ahead of an academy in Ireland is a lot of paperwork and a lot of admin. And Noel hasn't coached directly since obviously the under-20s, so I'm sure he's buzzing to get back. You know what I mean? He made a name for himself as a coach in Clongowes. Like, he is a coach, who's just very good at management. So I think this will be brilliant for him to focus on attack backs without all that other nonsense that can get in the way, and just see how good he can be as a specialist coach.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Gav, at the start, it is a loss to the Irish rugby system for now. It's incredible the number of players you'd speak to who'd mention him as a kind of key influence in their careers, and they are such important roles. Like, having really high quality personnel underneath the limelight is almost as important as the guy who's in charge at the top and getting all the headlines, because they're so key in the development of the players at such a crucial point in their career. So that'll be a big appointment for Leinster, obviously. But I always find it fascinating when people come back in with different experiences. Even you look at Ian Costello's coming into Munster after being in England. You listen to Ron O'Gara speaking about what he's learned, obviously in very elite environments in Crusaders, has had a massive impact on how he is as a coach, and the kind of experiences you would have known in France as well, Bernard. So it definitely adds something when people go away in any aspect of life, really. And all the more so in coaching, where cultures and norms can be different, because we do loads of good stuff in Ireland, but we have a very kind of structured way of doing things, and it can be eye-opening seeing a different method.
Just to bring you back to something you were saying earlier, Bernard, about how you could join a new setup and expect it to be as organised as previous setups, or rather you'd want it to be, and it's maybe a bit of a shock to the system to see how it isn't. Was that a big challenge for you? Maybe even the biggest challenge outside of a language barrier in France. I guess the sense that you knew what kind of good looked like, or you knew what a club, how a club should operate. You go over there in a kind of a smaller role in the grand scheme of things, and can't change things yourself overnight. You can probably see a lot of things that the club is actually doing wrong, but that you can't really affect. You can only sort of operate within your role for the time being.
Yeah, absolutely. And the worst thing you can do is come in and go, that's crap, that's crap, that's crap. That's not how we do things, because they that's what they know and that's what they believe in, and that has worked traditionally for them in that rugby environment. I think what you need to do is just keep your head down and focus on doing a good job of what you're responsible for. Build trust, build confidence, and then slowly at the right time, add your opinion, but not in a condescending way, and as an alternative point of view and a discussion point. But you got to be able to deal with that. I think, like, I've seen so many foreigners go to France in particular, go to Japan as well, and they go in with blinkers on, and it generally doesn't lead to success. I think you need to find a balance and a mix of what's really important in that culture, to that nationality or to that group, and obviously the things that you feel can really move the dial in terms of performance. But the ones that are only going to make a marginal effect on the performance, or you're not sure, well, give up on those. Give up on those. Don't try and change everything. I mean, so I'll give you a stupid example, like Coca-Cola, right? So like Coca-Cola is a big part of, or maybe less so now, but like even up to 4 or 5 years ago, for team lunches, like they wanted Coca-Cola, like whatever, right? And again, like it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense nutritionally. But like if Diet Coke came out or sparkling water, they'd be banging the tables, until they got the Coke, whatever. And like obviously my initial instinct is, that's nonsense. You know what I mean? Don't it's not good for you. It's full of sugar. It's not going to have any effect performance-wise. But like the doctor over there, the doctor of the club is like the guru. I mean, they have more say than the head coach. But like he was telling me, I had a couple of discussions with him, and he was saying, no, for the mind point of view, this was giving them the boost they need, and rugby's so hard. And eventually you just back off. You back off because okay, I know it is a marginal gain as such, but is it really that important? You know what I mean? Would you not be better off getting them to do a little bit more homework at night, and study the opposition, or to be more detailed in their one-on-ones? Like there's battles you need to fight, and I considered absolutely fighting that, and eventually I saw sense. But so there's an example of just something that it wouldn't happen in the Anglo-Saxon or the All Blacks or whatever, but over there it's very much part of it, and just go with it, let it roll. Skiing's another one. Sorry, skiing's another one. Sorry, Murray. Like our lads used to go ski on a Wednesday, and you'd be basically biting your nails, hoping you weren't going to get a phone call at 5 o'clock to tell you your star player has just done his cruciate. But we were like, that was part of it. If I had told those lads they couldn't ski, there would have been anarchy. And it's not the case of giving in all the time, but we knew we weren't near the beach. We knew to recruit players, retain players, being allowed to ski was one of the things we had in our favour. So you have to let it roll, but it doesn't make sense. There's a reason why everyone's contract in Ireland, you're not allowed to do dangerous sports. You know what I mean? Because it's risky, but some of those things you have to just kind of accept. And as I said, it's not you don't worry about them, but you just accept it.
What about when the shoe's been on the other foot a little bit, Birch? If you've identified a squad that needs a little bit of a lift, have you ever organised any offbeat, bungee jumps, helicopter rides, that kind of thing? Yeah, no, look, I think, and actually I spoke to a friend of mine who's coaching a team who are in the top 14 next year, and it's going to be difficult for them on Wednesday. And we talked about my first year in Grenoble when we got promoted from Pro D2, and over there, team spirit and team cohesion is really important, because it's a very long season, particularly if you're down, if you're going to be at the bottom of the table, you're going to ship some hidings, and there's a lot of pressure then on those home games, those games against concurrent direct, the teams you have to beat to stay up. So you're playing within a league within a league, or maybe a league within 3 leagues. So you're playing for that 14 to 10. And so anyone that you think is going to be in that, you have to beat them, at least at home and possibly away. So there's massive pressure, for those weeks. And so we would have, in fairness, my old boss, Fabrice Landreau, was very good at this. I mean, at the start of the season, he would map out,
12 or 14 activities that we would do during the year, and we would do them regardless. You often hear of teams, they lose 2 games, there's an emergency meeting, and they're gone off somewhere, on some kind of excursion to try and regain the team spirit. Whereas I think you're better off actually saying at the start of the year, look, we value, we're going to have fun, we're going to enjoy it, we want to spend time together, and in August we're doing this, in September doing this, October doing this. And to be honest, we did a lot of stuff up in Alpe d'Huez because they were a sponsor of ours, and so we'd go up there for 2 or 3 days, and in the middle of the season really, and the lads had let loose, and coaches let loose, and it was good fun. But we did other stuff, like we helped pick grapes, so every year we were part of the harvesting of grapes for wine, and then the lads, some of the players would smash the wine with their feet, in those big buckets, and then we'd have a lovely meal and wine. Whatever, wherever you are in the world, you got to try and tap into what's in that 40-mile radius, But the Dragons, we had no money for a pre-season tour, so we had Kerry Jones, was my forwards coach, and he had a farm in Usk, and all we could get was basically camping on his farm, and we started at 4 o'clock, bonfire, which by 7 o'clock was a dead duck. It was disastrous, and so the World Cup was on. The World Cup was on down to town, and we had to. So the lads said, "Look, we're bored out of our minds here. Whatever. Can we go down and watch the World Cup?" So we said, "Okay, right." But we had to trek through a forest. We had to cross over a river, and then we got into Usk, and we had a bit of a pub crawl, which was fine. But think about the reverse journey, right? Coming back, crossing through a river, going through a forest. Yeah, put it this way, we were lucky everyone was found the next morning.
That all sounds unbelievable. But just remember, Leinster will soon be able to bring their players to a whitewater rafting facility in the city centre. So we've got it all here.
Those marquee names from abroad that you were talking about recently that Leinster haven't signed, that will be the game changer. You can be sure of it. Before we move on, Murray, what about yourself when you were playing down in France? Any kind of wacky trips or team bonding exercises?
I mean, I played for a club that couldn't even afford to put us on a bus, really, to be honest. So they just stick us in the bar. Everyone would have their own 30-pack of fags, and this would be the night before an away match, and get stuck in. So yeah, it wasn't as glamorous as going skiing or anything like that. We just got into the clubhouse and they just let us have free reign.
It sounds pretty glamorous in a 1970s France kind of way. We were talking about Irish coaches settling in abroad and adapting to foreign culture. And to be fair, it's not as big a leap maybe for Jerry Flannery at Harlequins, but I think it was the defining image of that game, certainly from an Irish point of view. Flannery bouncing up and down in the stands after that remarkable comeback. And we'll chat about that final now, Premiership final, Murray, which is, is it Saturday? Is the French one tomorrow? We'll chat about France as well. But Exeter Quins, first and foremost, just great to see Jerry enjoying himself so much, isn't it?
Well, I mean, who didn't enjoy that game? It was Bristol in the end, obviously didn't. It was a ridiculous game of rugby. One of the most enjoyable I can remember seeing for several years. Just the nature of Bristol's initial burst, brilliant attacking rugby, and then the comeback, obviously just absolutely stunning. It seesawed and went this way and that way into extra time. Just had absolutely everything. And you can understand the ecstasy of Quins. It's been an unbelievable kind of bounce back for them since Paul Guster left the club. They weren't in great nick at that stage, and they've really impressed ever since. Their attacking rugby is just really joyful to watch. Nick Evans doing a brilliant job with their attacking game, and it'll be fascinating to see how they go against the established force of Exeter, who are so good at grinding opposition out, so good at being really ruthless and clinical when they get into your 22. But Quins will feel that their attack can cut any defence, and I'm fascinated to see that kind of match up in styles. And as you say, there's a great example. Jerry Flannery doing really well as a coach abroad. Obviously John Muldoon and Conor McPhillips in Bristol were left absolutely devastated from giving up that really strong position. But it is going to be another absorbing final, I think, and it's hard to look past Exeter, but you just can't wait to see Quins have a real rattle at it.
Just to touch upon those Bristol lads and Pat Lam at the helm, Bernard, when you do forfeit a lead like that in a game as important as that, do you have to almost just leave the players to it for a while before even addressing it, or do you come straight back in a Monday and say, here's where we made an absolute hames of it? Like, that feels like a really devastating one to me that I wouldn't, as a player, want to even be hearing about a few days later.
Yeah, I think that's probably one where you let the lads go on holidays and you start to address it in pre-season and just try and create ways of stopping that total momentum. Momentum is always going to shift against you in a game, but you need to have breaks in place to try and win it back or certainly take from it. I think Quins is a fascinating success story in terms of, like, you know, obviously they won a title under Conor O'Shea, but they haven't been successful, and that's why the board went and got Paul Gustard. And Paul Gustard, I mean, his mentality is what worked in Saracens in England for him, you know, is the model. And he tried to implement it with a group of players who, in fairness, very strong-minded, and you know, they didn't get the results, and it was at a stage where he was going to have to move on a lot of players and kind of rebuild again, or the club, you know, he moved on from the club. And you often see an emotional rise, you know, a couple of weeks after a coach leaves. But in fairness to Quins, I have to give them massive credit, because they have stuck to they've gone back to the Quins tradition, which is play and attack, which they had under Conor and I've always kind of had, which they'd lost a little bit under Paul, which is more around kicking game. But they've actually added mental strength and real resilience, which they haven't had over the last 5 or 6 years, you know. So if they could go win it now, I think it's not player run, it's not coach run, it's everybody obviously got together, you know, when Gustard left and spoke about the need to react properly to it and get better. And you see guys like Marcus Smith and Don Brandt as the new generation of Quins, and then obviously, you know, you've still Danny Kerr and you know, and a few of the other kind of guys who are legacy players there who may get to finish their career with a trophy now. It's a phenomenal opportunity for them. But I think it's brilliant to see them back to where they were at, back to their true philosophy. But that wasn't winning them trophies. They seem to have added, getting them to finals even. They've added a little bit more mental strength. To come back from 28-0 down is phenomenal, particularly against a team like Bristol who can go score again. You know, Bristol have been involved in a lot of high-scoring games, but they've come out the right side of most of them.
Just watching the end of that game, Murray, and the kind of reserves of energy that Harlequins found, and I know adrenaline and that old word momentum do contribute to this as well, but my mind immediately wandered back to that week when Jerry Flannery was talking about the Pro 14 being weak, and then Ulster absolutely hockeyed them in the Challenge Cup, because ultimately Quins forfeited that competition for all intents and purposes by playing a second string experimental kind of team. And it paid dividends, or at least it seems to have paid dividends by sacrificing that tournament. You kind of have to, like, it kind of felt distasteful at that time, even though understand completely why they're doing it. But now, in the cold light of day, in a Premiership final, kind of against the odds, you have to say it paid off, probably.
They have managed it really well since the turning point of the season and the change in staff. They've clearly had a goal, and as Bernard says, they've had a clear identity that they followed, that the players have absolutely embraced. The way they play suits all those guys, like Marcus Smith and Don Brandt. They want to attack, they want to take on defenders, they want to counter-attack, they want to use kick return as a chance to score straight away if they can. And they're well coached. I mean, even some of the more fluid, broken up kind of tries, they have sense and a little bit of structure to them, where, you know, they're using a couple of line-out plays with multiple options to go front door, back door, and they're making really good decisions. You think of the one where Don Brandt goes straight through the middle, a nice front door pass, whereas most teams probably go out the back there, having potentially pre-prescribed it as that. So yeah, they've kind of given players that responsibility, and that group has thoroughly taken it on, and it is just riveting to watch.
You're leaning towards Exeter prediction-wise, Murray, yeah?
Yeah, I am.
Same for you, Birch?
No, I actually think Quins have momentum, and I think Exeter are a little bit off. I know they got through a hard semi-final, but I don't think Exeter. I think Exeter are missing the crowds. I know it's going to be 10,000 there. More international players this year than before. You know, it's difficult sometimes to to back it up. And I just see little weaknesses in their game. They're not as dominant as they were, for sure. Look at it, they're right to be favourites, but I think Quins and Twickenham, with their attacking game, I think Quins can win.
In France, Toulouse and La Rochelle running it back. It'd be typical now, Murray, if it was the most free-flowing, spotless game of rugby you'll ever see in the top 14 final. How different or similar do you expect this game to be? I guess conditions might determine that, in fairness, but do you see it as being like pretty much as close as last time, almost flip of a coin stuff?
Yeah, I do see it as very evenly matched. I wouldn't anticipate it as high an error count as there was last time, when there was an unbelievable amount of nervousness you could sense from the game, and both teams were uncharacteristically sloppy. I would imagine it'll be a little bit more refined, a little bit more fluent and cohesive from both teams. Toulouse have had a big blow. They've lost Roman Ntamack. He was KO'd last weekend, a big red card, high tackle on him, and a nasty one. He was out cold before he hit the ground. So they'll have to rejig, obviously, in the back line. I think there's a bit of chat, Bernard, about Ramos potentially playing 10 and rejigging their back line that way. So a loss for them, but of course we know their strength and depth. I'm just fascinated to see what La Rochelle do slightly differently. But like, hopefully keeping 15 men on the pitch for the entirety of it will help a huge amount. But again, they'll feel they missed chances last time. They'll have scouted Toulouse that little bit more, and a coach as clever as Ronan O'Gara and also John O'Gibbs, they'll have picked out hopefully a couple more little opportunities there to really put Toulouse under pressure. So it's thrilling for their club. Again, we've spoken about the rise quite a few times, but it's hard to ignore. It's hard not to be impressed by it. They've tied down guys to contracts. We saw this week Skelton's going to stay in another few years, and Rule and Dylan Lades as well. Key guys are staying. They've got Dante coming in this summer as well, who'll add another bit of punch in midfield. So they're tracking the right direction, but it's a lovely opportunity and a lovely rematch so soon after that Champions Cup final. I anticipate a real thriller here.
How different a prospect are Toulouse for Raj and John O'Gibbs, Bernard, with potentially Thomas Ramos at 10 rather than Ntamack?
It's a lot easier, to be honest. I think Ramos is a good player. He's played a lot of fullback, but he wouldn't have that natural comfort at 10. I haven't seen him look as comfortable as 10 as Ntamack. I think he'll go back to his kicking game, which is very strong, but he'll be less of a threat to the line. And probably, to be honest, that's probably the way to play against La Rochelle, because their defence is so good. You can actually get yourself in trouble trying to overplay against them, and you probably are better off having a really strong kicking strategy. So from that point of view, that might suit their tactics. But in terms of just individualism and X factor and sheer ability, as a running threat, Ramos, he's a very good player, and he's a French international. So I'm not knocking him, but definitely Ntamack is just a little bit more creative, I think, naturally at 10.
For La Rochelle, Birch, sticking with yourself, is it about just ironing out some of those blown opportunities from earlier in the game, making one of those count, build a little bit of scoreboard pressure, and take it from there? Like, because I think the flip side of that is, if you miss a few opportunities again, there's probably subconsciously a little bit of a pattern sinks in, and you kind of think, Jesus Christ, we're doing it again. So it feels extra important that they kind of convert an early opportunity, provided they do create one.
Yeah, and they've struggled against Toulouse historically, but I think they'll get massive belief from the final, where they went down to 14 men and yet stayed in the game. I think that's absolutely massive for them. So as a coach, John O'Gibbs and O'Gara, I mean, in terms of creating that mindset, in terms of building confidence and belief this week, I think they'll be able to get so much from that final, and they'll just stress the need for discipline. And it's difficult for Toulouse to back it up again. They've started to be hit by some injuries, and we're lucky enough to beat Bordeaux, to be honest. So I think La Rochelle are showing more form since the final, and I think they'll get a top 14, which Roger's second, if he can do it with two different clubs. That's pretty special.
And hopefully Darren Sweetenham involved in the 23. He's obviously done really well. It'd be nice to see a West Cork man as well winning a medal.
Yeah, a West Cork man doing well over France has a nice little bit of circularity to it, doesn't it, after Reggie's song in Bandon? Against Toulouse as well, it'd be nice. Murray, on a scale of 1 to 10, how badly infected are you by Lions fever?
I'd probably come up to a 7 this week once they named the team early on Tuesday, which was a nice move, I think. Everyone kind of got a little bit excited, and you're looking at combinations and you're looking at who might be a test starter in that team. And there are a couple, and you may have guys even ruling themselves out in an early stage with an underperformance. So it goes up a notch. And the fact that they're playing Japan as well adds to the excitement for me. We haven't seen them since 2019 at the World Cup, where they thrilled most people and broke Irish hearts and Scottish hearts and got all the way to the quarterfinal with some outstanding players. It is going to be really challenging for them getting up to test match speed after such a long break. But if they can even show a hint of what they showed at the World Cup, it's going to be exciting, high tempo, really skillful. And with coaches like Tony Brown and Jamie Joseph, they'll have hopefully picked out a few cool little starter plays for us to enjoy as well. So it is going to be really exciting. There's a massive Irish element in the team. Obviously, all 7 of them are involved, 6 in the starting team. And it's hard not to be excited about some of that opportunity. Ty Byrne at 6 is going to be really interesting. They view him as a back row, according to Warren Gatland. The Aki Henshaw centre pairing, and Gatland's really excited about that, calling Henshaw a world-class midfielder this week, and no one can disagree with that. So there's loads of reason to get excited. They're flying out on Sunday for the tour proper, but this is a nice fixture with 16,500 people in the stadium as well, just to get us started.
Bert, same question to you about how excited you are about this Lions tour, because we've had conversations a little bit further out from it when I think all 3 of us felt a dilution of our enthusiasm for it. I think, in fairness, probably because the whole thing wasn't really settled yet. We didn't know where it was going to be on. We didn't even know if it would be the right thing for it to take place. Maybe the jury's still out on that one, but are you in the mood now?
No. I'm a 3. I'm a 3 out of 10. But I will get there. Don't worry. I'm a diesel engine. Murray's a petrol. No, the only reason I'm not is because it's like I actually don't really get. I can see the purpose of these pre-tour games, but just I'm knee deep in under 20s at the moment, who are playing Wales on Friday night, and obviously the Premiership final, the top 14 final, and I will get absolutely on the Lions bandwagon, but just I want to see them on the plane and then having a full tour squad and playing against South African teams really, and obviously there's still going to be distractions of under 20s in Ireland playing USA and Japan, but at the moment I've prioritised the other competitions that are kind of mid-flow or wrapping up.
You're doing
day by day kind of guy.
You're doing a Harlequins on it with the Lions tour, are you? But what about from Japan's point of view, Bernard? I'm sure you can appreciate it through their lens. You saw Kotaro Matsushima talking earlier in the week about how this is a once-in-a-lifetime game for him, and as Murray says, we haven't seen any of them at test level since 2019, and this is one for the grandchildren from their point of view, isn't it? And I always think back of, was it 2005 they played Argentina in Cardiff, full house, and I do kind of like it from the other side's point of view that the non-traditional or the countries that the Lions don't tour get a shot at them before they make that journey.
No, 100%. And Japan have earned this given through their performance at the last 2 World Cups, and they've been so unlucky that COVID has stopped that chance to play against the big boys more often. So absolutely, look, I do appreciate it's a huge thing for them and a huge honour, and they deserve it. And I am looking forward to seeing them play. I mean, in fairness, I have been watching, as Murray has, some of the Japanese league, and so they have played. Their domestic players have played much more than, say, the South Africans have played that we saw play for the Bulls against Benetton. So they shouldn't be as cold as the South Africans were. They've got brilliant coaches. They play an unbelievably attractive style of rugby, and I think they'll definitely ask questions from a defensive point of view for Steve Tandy. He's going to get challenged against Japan in a completely different way than he will by the box, But so in some ways, it's actually not ideal preparation at all, because there's no team they're going to play, or certainly the test matches are going to be completely different in terms of the game plan that the Boks are going to throw at us. But it's a fitting reward for Japan given what they've built, and I suppose again it's another chance for them to show the world, that this is their team that deserve to be at the top table and playing prestigious fixtures against the tier 1 countries.
That's why they're so important. Like, they're arguably the most important nation in Test rugby at the moment, because they've kind of broken that ceiling and they've split up the standard and status quo in World Cups, and we so badly needed that. I think there needs to be a huge push to keep them at that top table, give them a fixture against Lions, give them really good tests every single year so that they can keep growing and improving, because we need more teams that are capable of getting into quarterfinals of World Cups. We need teams that can knock off Ireland and Scotland in pools, and not just that they're going to qualify out of it every single time. It was too predictable for too long, so it's massive. And their league improving as well, that would be fantastic to see. So I totally agree. It's a brilliant fixture for them. And speaking to, I was on the call. Now, in fairness, it was all through Japanese with an interpreter, but I was on the call with Himeno and Matsushima, and they're just both really excited just to get this opportunity. Himeno played the Trans-Tasman final last weekend, where he did the haka pre-match. He was speaking about that, said it was a very cool experience. And then he jumps on the plane, and 24 hours later, he's in Edinburgh. And he said he was pretty tired, but he said, this is an opportunity I just couldn't miss. So he's there and ready to play. This means a huge amount to them. And yeah, can't wait to see just how they turn up.
What kind of performance do you want to see the Lions produce, Murray, that would get Bernard up to like a 5 or a 6?
Well, as cohesive as I don't know if we're going to get him there this week, but as cohesive a performance as possible. These guys have been in camp for 2 weeks now. In fairness, the Exeter players have the final, but most of the guys who are playing this and starting this week have been there for 2 weeks. They've bedded in the game plan. They've got a bit of cohesion off the pitch as well. So I don't think it should be completely rusty from them. These are guys who played high intensity matches in the Six Nations. Some of the Irish players haven't played for 5 or 6 weeks, but they should be fresh and raring to go. I think their approach will be different to what they tried to do to South Africa. Absolutely. Burns mentioned the differences in style and approach there. Japan's line speed isn't as high. Their kicking game is different to South Africa's, less contestable probably. And they play at a higher tempo, so you've got to adapt, and you don't want to give away too much of your strategy for South Africa as well. Like, they'll be working away on that completely in the background. I don't know how much we'll see of that against the Japanese. Obviously, you're going to want to test out certain elements of it, but it'll be a different strategic approach. One of the most important things is those combinations I mentioned, like Murray and Dan Biggar. That has the look of a test starting halfback combination there, and if they start this tour well, then they'll have that momentum onto the plane into South Africa and into the tour. And then in the back row, I'm excited to see the guys like Byrne and Conan, who a lot of people probably wouldn't have in their starting test team, just get a chance to show exactly what they can do and impress Gatland and bring that kind of momentum they've carried into tour all the way over to South Africa. So there's loads of little bits there. Even Ian Henderson, what a Six Nations he had. He's beside the tour captain in the second row. He'll probably be calling the line out. So there's a responsibility there. And first impressions are so important. Bad first impressions can be really telling. Like, that history tells us that about the first Lions game of the campaign. Players who underperform there don't really get a shot. It's a narrow window, so you've got to put your hand up.
I know it's going to be a busy few weeks for yourself, Mer. Do you want to talk listeners through what's coming up for the 42 members over the course of the Lions Tour and Ireland Summer?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to flag up what we're going to be doing, members at the 42.ie if you want to join up. But basically we'll have video reviews every kind of Monday with myself and Owen Toolin going through clips of the weekend, Lions, Ireland, under 20s, whatever it may be. We'll have post-match podcasts after every Lions game on the Saturdays, also the 2 Wednesday fixtures. We'll have 2 Rugby Insiders emails a week for members on Tuesdays and Fridays.
I think that's the editor of Sports, Joe, just interjecting there.
Sorry, that's the postman, the dreaded postman.
I'm well used to it here. And also we'll have a couple of live events. We'll be jumping on a Zoom call with members, having a chat with them, answering questions, doing a couple of analysis bits as well. So really getting people involved and getting their questions, and they'll drive our coverage. So loads going on across the board. As Bernard mentions, it's not just Lions. There's Ireland matches, which are going to be really interesting. Under 20s, loads of other international rugby as well. And yeah, we're going to try and cover it as comprehensively as possible. So members at the 42.ie.
Yeah, looking forward to the couple of live events, especially. They've been really good fun to do, as much as it's not quite Liberty Hall Theatre or wherever. Just getting people on Zoom and having a chat, 3 of us, has been really enjoyable. So we'll do that soon. Bernard, thank you as always.
Yeah, thank you. Just quickly, I'd urge the listeners to keep an eye out in the under-20s. I think they started really well the weekend. Some outstanding players. They haven't played a lot of rugby, so they're not probably fresh in our minds, or we're not as familiar with them as we were the previous two generations. We can't get to see them live, obviously, in Cork, but I think they're shaping up nicely, and I know a lot of people like to see the next Craig Casey or John Hodnett or Thomas Ahern, they're playing Friday night against Wales in what should be an interesting game.
Who caught your eye in particular last day, Birch?
Kennellan was absolutely outstanding. He has an offload game, which I haven't seen an Irish back row at that level have for a while. Very comfortable, very explosive. Soroka and Shane Jennings, I know there's a feature on the 42, outstanding hurler, a fullback for Galway Miners. He only got a bit of good ball in the second half, but he looked quite excited. We know about Osborne. I mean, for me, it's kind of trying to find. I see guys who I haven't seen play for the provinces really, I've obviously seen Sirocco play last year, but Kennellan and Shane Jennings and Call Ford at 12 kind of grew into the game, very quick, very explosive. So they were the ones who and obviously the front row, both front rows, the starting front row and the sub front row were superb, which is great to see.
Yeah, what about having a bit of depth at under 20 level? As you say, Lasisi and Illo were brilliant starting, but Jack Boyle coming off the bench and 2 turnovers within quick succession. It's brilliant to see the prop stocks in rude health.
Yeah, and Jack Boyle's a brilliant player. He's underage again next year. He was the guy coming out of the schools that I would have said, he's going to go make it as a pro, as a prop. But then, obviously, there's even at 20s level, there's really good depth coming through from elsewhere, which is exactly what we want to see.
Yeah, there was plenty more 20s chat as well on Monday's members pod, members.the42.ie, if you want to sign up there for all of the Lions stuff and for extra podcasts around Ireland's test matches this summer. We look forward to having more people in the famed WhatsApp group as well, more questions. Come here, enjoy all of the rugby over the weekend. It seems a bit overwhelming there for Birch. He's at a 3 with the Lions stuff, but there are some really high caliber games, so have a good one. And we will catch you on Monday with Murray and Owen, and on Thursday with the 3 of us back here in this regular slot. Until then, mind yourselves. Take it easy.